You are listening to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, What's Possible with Ben. Welcome to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, where we take a research-based, trauma-informed, and results-focused approach to quitting porn. This approach has been revolutionary and changed thousands and thousands of lives. I'm your host, Sarah Brewer. Hey, you guys, I'm so excited to share this interview with you today I had with Ben. He is a client of Jessica. He came in the program and he did the one-on-one coaching aspect, which is such an amazing experience. If you have the desire to come and do it, it's really where people come in and are able to make this deepest level of change with a ton of one-on-one support. And Jess is just amazing. Ben's story really will resonate with you if you grew up super religious, have maybe some scrupulosity tendencies, and man, just like a really powerful story of what overcoming the shame can do, especially if that's your background and if you felt tons of pressure and felt like you had to hide it. Like if it came out, it would just destroy everything. His story is really powerful if you resonate with that, which I know many of you do. So we do talk religion, we do talk faith in this episode and its impact on Ben and his work in overcoming. I know many of you will resonate with that. If you don't, I'm just here to remind you that we're not a faith-based program, which means when I say that, like whatever your faith background is, we implement and we help, and our coaches are from all different backgrounds. But you don't need to be a part of a specific faith background. You don't even need like a religious background at all to see tons and tons of progress here. So excited for you guys to hear Ben's story and be inspired by it. Please enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast episode. I am so excited to introduce you to Ben today. Ben has been a client of Jessica. Jess isn't here with us today, but he has an awesome story. So excited to hear from him today. Okay, Ben, do you want to start telling us your story? You can start wherever you'd like, but let's get into it.
Yeah, for sure. I want to just do a service to all of the listeners because I know that we all come from different faith backgrounds. And I would be doing a disservice to my story if I didn't really use the lens of my faith background, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which I know a lot of us are. But there's going to be a lot of things that ring true for all of us in this story. I had some belief systems that I think I just learned things. I think I probably heard them and I interpret them in a certain way that were damaging. And as I put them into practice, and it hurt. And I've learned why that is now, and I want to share some of that. But I also am the descendant of some modern high-profile leaders within the LDS Church. And there was a lot of stress that I put on myself in terms of keeping up image and living up to legacy. And that related to an expectation or a belief that I needed to, have that approval. And that came through, do you serve in certain callings, or do you, those were qualifiers and things. And so this was this kind of structure for me.
Yeah, and let me just kind of clarify for some of our listeners too. So there's like high profile leaders that maybe you're a descendant of, and so that creates a lot of maybe pressure or stress, or if I'm struggling with this is actually maybe more of a big deal than for other people because of where I come from, because of my family. Is that
and kind of this expectation, like you shouldn't. This shouldn't be your issue. This shouldn't be your problem, and you should know better or whatever. and so it really started to play out when I was 11, and that's a long time ago. And I'm not going to date myself, but it was a long time ago. So as 11, my best friend lived a block away from me, and his dad had struggled with a lot of health issues, and his dad passed away. And we were so close, and the world was just so different at that time that I remember going to school, and the principal came and got me out of my class and drove me to his house in the middle of the school day, that just wouldn't happen today, to be with him on the day that his dad had died. And there, going forward from that, there was, this big kind of expectation that I think I, not necessarily like given to me, but I felt, which was to help him process through this. Like I needed to be his friend. I needed to be there for him. And, so I've just been spending a lot of time together. And so that would be a lot of time spent with him. And eventually his mom moved on, actually pretty quickly, had a boyfriend. And my friend, found some magazines that her new boyfriend had been hiding. And of course, that became like the focus of, an 11-year-old, like, hey, let me show you this thing. Look what I found. And, you know, curiosity and like, oh my gosh, kind of shock. And, we both immediately were like, after like, this probably isn't. I remember we hiked into the gully behind our houses and we buried it. And I was like, is he going to be mad? And, my friend is like, I don't know. I don't care. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. Right. We feel good about that. So we
That's
buried it,
sweet. That's cute.
well, as 12-year-olds, we were becoming deacons in the church. So it was like our first big responsibility. And we both felt pretty terrible about that experience. So we remember we both went like we should go talk to the bishop, and that's someone who gives us the stamp of approval of being worthy to have this new calling, right? And it was great. It was not a bad experience, right? I mean, it's kind of a pat on the head, like, don't do that, and we're like, okay, like, gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm 12, like, great. But you're 12 and you're curious, and then you saw something, and it doesn't change the fact that just kept happening repeatedly because he would find more and more things, and I was encouraged again to be with my friend, to help him process through the death of his dad and to give him some stability. And over those years, it was this on again, off again kind of discovery, and then guilt and discovery and guilt. And, us talking to each other like we shouldn't be doing this, but like, but it was also like I have to be there for my friend, but I know my parents would be so disappointed in this. So it's this cycle of like, you do this. And, that was, I felt trapped because I knew I needed to be there for him, but that became like a component of our relationship where I felt like, it's his house, it's his stuff. He's, and I needed to be there to support him. But so I just didn't, I didn't want to let anybody down. I didn't want to let him down. I didn't want to let my parents down. I didn't want to. And so that really weighed on me. I didn't know who to talk to about it. And that led to one of the first big vocabulary words that I learned from working through your program is scrupulosity. And so scrupulosity being like a form kind of religious OCD in a way, or creating false narratives, but really around like worthiness and especially, within the religious space. And so I would be the kid and I shared a room with my two brothers, right? So I didn't want to bother them at night, but I'm under my covers with a flashlight, reading my scriptures, looking up specific scriptures about how bad I was and how like I was going to face punishment and torment and how disqualifying I was to receiving forgiveness because it was this constant like, well, I know I shouldn't do that, but I did it again. Or, I was with my friend and we looked at this again. And, so I started this belief system of like, Heavenly Father's probably getting really tired of me asking for the same thing. Like, help me stop doing this. He's probably like, this is annoying. And I created this like mindset that like he's disappointed. He's disappointed. And that drives me away, right? Like I don't want to pray and talk anymore. And, I would fight through that. And I went and, talked with my bishop again. And again, great experience, different bishop this time, but great experience actually. He was amazing. And he even said, well, I remember him saying, like, if you sat here and told me that you didn't, I'd be like, I think you're kind of lying. Everybody, like, there's so many. So he was the first one who kind of normalized it, but it was so rare. And I remember just thinking, like, wow, how great was that? But he's like, but you really gotta stop. I'm like, I know, right? I get you. But I was already kind of in this mindset of like, okay, I gotta be working on it. I mean, at the same time, there's things that we do within the church to kind of show contrition, and part of that is I'm going to restrict you from certain activities. And in a very small congregation that I was a part of, with very little amount of young men my age that were responsible for certain ordinances like communion, sacrament, and when you're told you can't do that, you feel like there's a scarlet letter. You kind of sit there and people look at you like, why are you not helping? And so that I remember feeling pain there.
We don't have to go into that, but how do you feel like that affected you, and how old were you when that happened? So, and just to kind of clarify, like it was, okay, so you go and you tell the bishop, I viewed porn, and he says, okay, you got to stop, and like you're loved and it's okay, but you can't pass the sacrament anymore. And
Right.
that's what the 12-year-olds are assigned to do, is to pass the sacrament.
Yeah. At this point, I'm like 16, so I'm blessing the sacrament or whatever.
Yeah, so you have even more like blessing the sacrament. And so
yeah.
then there kind of comes the, like, people notice.
Yeah. So you're sitting
People
down
know that.
there and and yeah, my parents didn't ask. They just kind of, figured. And, so then it feels more shameful, like where I feel like on that end where it's okay, who do I talk to about this? Or how do I feel like this is leading me towards a place of healing or an acceptance when it feels like I just have the eyes on me, which is, what did you do? And
Yeah.
that hurts, So
Yeah. If anyone here has heard, I do ecclesiastical leader training every now and then, and we talk about how to help, kids who are working through this or others. And this is something that I really do not think is helpful. I do
yeah,
not think, and you can have different opinions about it, but I'm just going to throw that in here, is like, even like we're doing the best we can, and really trying to help people and kids and all these things. And I see this typically doing more harm than not. I'm just going to say that and let you keep going with your story.
yeah. Well, and I also want to say, like, my parents are amazing, and I'm sure that they, if they had noticed it or whatever, like that they would have kind of saw it as like, okay, he's doing good. Like, he's doing what he
Yeah.
needs to do to kind of get through the process. And throughout the years, there were definitely moments in which like my parents would either be aware of it, as a young teen, like, I'd be on my dad's computer, like have looked something up and he's like, that wasn't me. So, we talk, and so they were great, but it was nothing that they did. It was the fact that I did not want to let anyone down. So I just hid. It's that,
Yeah.
like, go hide. Like that is, and that's a thing. And don't show your weakness, and don't seek after it, And anyway, so there I am living in fear. So I had this moment where my grandmother, when I was 16, she passed away. And again, given the family that I come from, there were just a handful of speakers at the funeral, but one of them was President Hinckley and the other one was President Monson, prophets of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I was a pallbearer, and I was standing waiting to receive the casket to, put it into the hearse. And they came down from the stand and exited that way. And President Hinckley shook my hand. And this is just shortly after his talk about pornography being a plague, and I already felt like I'm dealing with this disease. And he shook my hand, and with his wonderful self and smile, asked me, "Are you keeping yourself worthy to serve a mission?" And I panic because you're 16 and you already feel like I'm fighting this. I have this plague that you just discussed. And at six, I mean, what am I? The only thing that came out of my mouth was yes, even though immediately it was like, you just lied to the prophet in his face while you're shaking his hand. And that killed me. That just gutted me. So I took that really, that hurt a lot. I guess in a way I kind of used it as like a negative motivation tool to prepare for my mission in a way. Like I'll show you like I am going to be worthy, even though in that moment I didn't feel. But this was the part where I started to confuse the difference between being worthy, just capital W worthy, and being temple worthy.
Mhm.
And so I attributed like the worth, like just being worth, like I'm worth something. I have value. I am worth being loved. Versus if I'm not living up to this set of standards, then I am further letting down God, and I'm letting down the leaders of this church. I'm letting down my parents. I'm letting down people close to me. Like I'm just letting them down. I'm just disappointing everybody. And that became this like framework for me, unfortunately. And I didn't really know the difference for a very long time. And that's probably like where like really shame kind of started for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a really painful experience. It sounds really painful. Is that wound? It's not trite. It is very damaging, that worthiness wound.
Yeah. I love when you use the word wound when we're talking about these things, like, because it is like, so it's behavior and things that I was doing that I knew was not good, but it created more wounds within me than just like the act of
Yeah.
the disobedience or whatever. So this was all at a time when I was like, I didn't know it at the time. Later on in life, diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety and whatever, but I was the epitome of the most anxious ADHD kid where just full. I played a lot of sports. I did a lot of performances. I did a lot of high profile things, but I was always the person who was like right before it was time to go on the field or on stage or whatever, I was in the bathroom getting sick. Like I just lived with this ball of anxiety, and
Mm.
that really fed the kind of shame and worry really kind of
Mm.
fed into that. So fast forward, I'm able to focus in and change and really desire to go serve as a missionary for our church. And I mean, this, and it's funny because one of the first podcasts I ever heard from you, Sarah, is like it blew my brain because you started in with like this first 8 minutes of like, this is my average, client or your person or program. They grow up in the church, they get exposed, to pornography at an early age. They kind of go back and forth with it. They lock it down. They go on a mission. They come home. Life starts, and then they find themselves kind of back in it, and they can't figure out why, and they're frustrated, and they're whatever, and they're kind of hiding it away. And like I sat there being like, does she know my story? Because
I'm like, actually, I'm talking about Ben. Ben doesn't even
yeah,
know I know who he is, but
no, for sure. It was super weird. It's like where you like look around, you're like, wait a minute, is there somebody like watching me? Like, so I it blew me away when I realized I thought my story was so unique. And so I had to go through this realization of like, I'm not unique and I'm happy to not be unique because there's so much of this and it's misunderstood and I've misunderstood it, because I had tried to self diagnose a lot, right? Like, so anyway, go on a mission, have a great mission experience. Like, first time of feeling like I'm free of these things. I'm obviously focused. I'm feeling very positive about my ability to move past this and be really dedicated. And, I came home and within a year, I'm married. I'm going to school full time. I'm working full time, so that's a lot of things to juggle. And I'm even called into like a bishopric in our ward. So kind of the leadership and at 22, 23 or whatever. Like, so there's just a lot. I mean, it's a lot of things.
it's a lot of things. And I talk about this, because I see this in like my family and like community. It's just really wild sometimes the expectations we have of these 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
And especially you come right home or you go, like the expectation, it's like get married, have kids, be responsible. If you're a man, make sure you're providing. Whereas the reality is in the world, it's probably not a bad thing to take a little bit of time and not feel so much pressure to be able to provide right away. It just takes time. 22
Yeah.
years old, 23 years old. So I can see how that might also build up, and correct me if I'm wrong, but build up some of these like, more stress, more anxiety, more pressure, more like, am I enough? Am I enough? Am I doing enough? I have to be providing. I have to be a great church leader. I have to be a great husband at
Well, and
25.
well, yeah. So it does. So I was dealing with that internally. Not that I think consciously acknowledge that. It's just that I had this like void that I was like, I have to, this is the level that not only like I have to live up to, I like need to in order to be viewed by God as worthy to, to do, I don't know, like just, I guess worthy
Yeah.
of love, like
Yes.
approval. Like,
Yes.
so
Mhm. Yeah.
but here's the problem. You have all those things and things are going to blow up, right? Like school
Yeah.
doesn't go great or your job doesn't go great or like I'm newly married. And so like we're trying to figure that stuff out. And
Yeah.
it's so much. And so, you know, I had firmly established this pattern of being this anxious ADHD teen, that hadn't figured it out, like developed my own coping strategies because that was never diagnosed. I had to just learn it on my own. And so this was the first, as I look back on it now, I go, okay, all these stressors came in. And another great term that I've learned from you is buffering. Like it's just, this is an activity, which is I'm going to do this instead of this because I don't want to face this right now. And
Yeah.
I had created this construct of where I'm like, you know, get to a certain point of stress or a certain negative viewpoint on myself or self-acceptance. And it had moved into, okay, I'm going to buffer with pornography, or I'm going to buffer with, these images, and it, like, as I've learned later in life as an ADHD adult, like, really it's a lot of related to dopamine. Like, we're kind of deficient in it. And so that's a really effective way of just forcing dopamine. I'm going to go look at something really exciting, and it's going to make me forget about my reality for the next few minutes. And you just do that. You do that to shut out. And you feel worse coming back out of it. And you're like, why did I do that? It felt great for 5 minutes to check out. But now I feel worse because now I feel stupid and I feel shame and I feel like, you know, and that was it. That's where, like, the whole crossover from guilt, like I did something wrong, to like I am something wrong. And that's just totally where I lived. I lived in this, I am wrong. I am wrong. I'm wrong. I am broken. I don't know why. I don't want to keep doing this. This is the worst ever. And it was just this cycle of and it's like I was one of those people that would set like these goals, like, oh, January 1st, it's over, right? Or my birthday, it's over. Like, and you fall into that trap too, because then you go months and months and then you slip up and you're like, okay, I just wasted all that time. It's terrible. And you just let that build up. It goes like that for quite some time. And then I heard like a phrase from you that blew my mind again, because I'd never put those words all together, when it was unwanted pornography use. And it's just 3 words. I'd never seen them strung together in a phrase like that. But I like it. For me, I'm like, I'd been struggling for all this time, for years and years, with like, I'm not addicted. Everything was around addiction. Like, it was never compulsory for me. It was never like this drive. It was just this like choice activity that I would do situationally to be like, to get out of. But I hadn't even noticed that yet. I hadn't even yet noticed what is driving me to choose this and why, right? I just knew, like, I hate this about myself. I hate myself for it. But I'm not addicted. And then, everything I was looking around like, oh, I don't think the 12-step program has, a programming or curriculum that makes sense for me. It doesn't, there's stuff that doesn't apply. Like, a lot of the media that I'm consuming is like, you're going to wreck your family. You're going to lose everything. Like, if you talk to anybody about it, or everything's around sexual deviancy. I'm like, I'm not a sexual deviant. Like, this is not like, this is not a gateway to something else. Like, I just couldn't figure out, but then I was also afraid to talk to anybody. Right.
Yeah. Well, and you're also in these leadership positions,
which is a trap, which is also a trap. And this is like, because then you're going to let anybody down. Right. Then it's even more public or shameful or whatever.
Right. Then if you do that and you get released from your calling, that's that 16-year-old, you can't pass the sacrament anymore, but that's like times 10. That's that like public shaming, community shaming.
For sure. And now I have bigger stakes, right? I've got my wife, I've got my children, I've got like, and then it's just letting so many more people down. Even though in my heart, I'm like, I need this change. I need this healing. I need some help, but I don't know how to do it. And so I guess the motivation was so much fear, about judgment and whatever. So I realized that I didn't have a pornography problem. I had a pornography solution. My solution was pornography, and it was a terrible one, right? There was no real solution. It was like, yeah, sure. Like, I can feel all this stress or whatever occasionally, and like, I'll just go, but it just wasn't there. So that's not real. Like, and so like I finally heard someone, so Clay Olson, who's the founder of Impact Suite, Fortify, I think it's the name, Clay.
Fortify. I've heard of it.
Fortify. Yeah, so it's like an app. It's like an accountability app or whatever. Something I looked into years and years ago. But then I started like following his stuff. And he was in an interview. Somebody asked him, like, so is this an addiction or not? And he's like, I'm not going to say that. It's like, but what I do think is that it is a spectrum of struggle. And I thought that's a really cool phrase. Like, because he's like, if you need to call it an addiction to get yourself to a place where you can get help, then do it. If it's a unwanted activity that you want to unpack and figure out why, like, then that's great too. And so for me, everything was so parked in addiction, right? And I'm like, doesn't resonate. But unwanted pornography use, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. For listeners, we have a bunch of podcast episodes where I dive into that a little bit more in depth if you're interested in hearing. What is an addiction? Am I addicted? Am I not addicted? How do I want to use this label? When is this helpful for me? And we typically, what you said, use it if it's helpful, but also it's not an addiction like a drug addiction. We got to be careful not to put them in the same category there. And we love the term unwanted porn use and we love the term porn habit. It seems to fit with a lot of our clients.
Sure. So I know I've spent a lot of time kind of building up to this story, but it's like for me, like this big culmination of like living this, what I felt like is a double life, like this fraudulent side of me where it's like, I can't, I mean, it almost feels like, I should say like I'm in real estate, right? So it's like my career and kitchens sell houses or your kitchens are always like heralded. It's like a place where everybody comes to, right? So I
Mhm.
imagine this like immaculate, beautiful, wonderful kitchen where bright and clean and just, you can smell the cookies that are cooking in there, right? Like it's, but every kitchen in my brain, it was like every kitchen has a junk drawer. Like that's where everything goes, right? Where it's like it doesn't have a place, and so it just gets shoved in there. And
Yeah.
it was like, okay, I have a junk drawer. I have a really ugly, dark, gross junk drawer, and I don't like everybody can see this kitchen on the outside, but I have this piece that I don't know how to unpack,
Mhm.
and I don't know who's going to do that with me and be okay with it. And so I felt trapped for sure and felt like a fraud. And then that led to just super big feelings of failure. And then in a short amount of time, there were a lot of things that just microcosmed like onto in my life. Like started a new job that imploded just unexpectedly and just dramatically terrible, right? And to me
Mhm.
personally, it was wrapped up in this. Then I tried to start a company with one of my best friends, and that blew up fantastically. And it was a waste of time and a waste of money. And it was embarrassing to have involved my friend in that. And, again, the real estate market, I just kind of talked about like, we hit this part where interest rates went crazy and inflation and
Mm.
just everything was so I just couldn't perform and couldn't get anything done. And I was feel like I was working so hard and failing at so many things. And then I totaled my truck, like just on a stupid mistake. And like all of that happened. And I just, the failure in me was just like, just so much. Like it was just so dark. And so it was really, leading me into wanting to just check out from that. And when I talked with Jess, and she's so great, and I want to just put a plug in for when I started.
Jessica is the one-on-one coach that you had
She
while you
is
were
my
in.
coach, and when I started this, I was like, okay, of course you think like, is this expensive? Like, is it worth the money? And you're like, okay. But at that point, I was just so hurt and beaten down. I was like, just take it, like take it. There had been times in the past when I had like talked myself out of it, like, and that I really wish that I had just gone through that. I'm like, no, I can listen to enough podcast episodes and I can, research the stuff on my own. But like, I would highly suggest if you need to process through some things, because, and I'll tell you why all of this, I'm working with Jessica on this, and I will say 95% of our appointments, we've never talked about pornography. Like,
Mm.
that's like a misnomer, right? Like, because
Right.
to overcome the unwanted use, you have to go and address the hard stuff. And that's what you have to unpack that. And that's so I'm describing this, and Jessica goes, "You're grieving." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "No, you're in grief. You need to process through this. Like everything you just said is terrible. And have you given yourself an opportunity to do this?" And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Like, and so then she, diagrams this whole grief process, and I'm taking notes, and I realize like, okay, yeah, like in the process, I won't get super nerdy, but it's kind of a circle as these processes go. And I got to like three-quarters of the way through the circle, and I built an off ramp where I
Mm.
would, to the I would just skip resolution. I'd go right towards like, I'm just going to buffer. Like
Mm.
I'm going to avoid that part to get to resolution. And by doing that, I was circumventing, I was robbing the opportunity to heal. And as I learned how to grieve these things out of my control, that is where, the gospel kind of came back into light, where I'm like, this is a section of thing that I can't do without the atonement of Jesus Christ. Like I can't change what happened here and what happened there. And I can't go back and have this person think differently about this or whatever. About I have to rely upon the atonement to fill that piece that I can't do. And until I started to realize that, and the fact that repenting or changing our ways or whatever was always the plan. Like it wasn't put there as like a side note. Like
It wasn't like plan B. It wasn't be perfect and plan B repent.
right. And that's what's interesting is I had told myself somehow that when you, let's say when you're baptized, you're now perfect, you're like on the road. And
Yeah.
if you deviate, then you need to, again, you've disappointed God, you've disappointed someone. You need to go back and get that forgiveness and get
Yeah.
back on the path. And now you're perfect again. And then you're going to fall off of it. Now you're disappointed.
Yeah.
So it's this constant round of disappointment. And so I had created this thought process of like this expectation that he would be disappointed every time, and so then it drives you into thinking like he doesn't want to hear from me anymore. He doesn't want. He's so tired of hearing from me about this. So, but it was this realization through this process of understanding grief and then rethinking about how I'm applying the atonement of Christ is the thing that we can be 100% perfect in is picking ourselves up.
Yeah.
So the perfection comes in turning back to God. It comes in, okay, I messed up. I'm going to be perfect in changing. I'm going to be perfect in returning. It's a constant, right? And it's that you just rinse and repeat that. And so it's not the expectation that God's going to be disappointed in you. It's actually, there's a great book I read called Is God Disappointed in You? Or Is God Disappointed in Me? It's by Kurt Frankl. And he has some points in there where he says he doesn't have an expectation, he has an expectancy. Like the expectancy is that he knows that we were going to struggle. And so like the Savior was provided for us to be able to repent and change, as opposed to like, well, you messed up. So now we got to put this guy in play. Like it's just part of it.
Yeah.
I think it was Elder Wilcox who had said, there's one of the hymns that we sing in church where amazed by the love Jesus proffers me. I never knew what the word proffer meant, right? Until he unpacked it and he's like, it's proactively offering.
Mhm.
So that forgiveness and that understanding and that love is proactively offered because we are going to mess it up. And we just need to be okay, like accepting that we're going to mess it up. And he knows that we're going to mess it up. And I, for so long, literally just thought about it's a subtle difference. Like it doesn't change the need for repentance, but it changes the intent behind it or the acceptance of Heavenly Father's love that our worth is infinite and it's not tied to whether or not we are worthy to go into a temple or worthy to do an ordinance. Like worth is innate.
Mhm.
The worth of souls is great in the sight of God. No asterisk, no, it's just period. Like that's it. So
Yeah.
once I was able to process through grief with Jessica, then it opened up so much because then I was like, okay, cool. I'm worth loving. I can love myself despite my mistakes. I can use my mistakes as data points to figure out why I did that or why that happened. And then I can change and I can live 100% authentically. I can clean out this junk drawer, right? And when it comes to like doing that, I have to give so much credit to my wife who has been so hurt by me, but also so forgiving and loving. And this is in the midst of all of the betrayal trauma that she's experienced because of this. And, because again, from her, like I was living in this construct of like, I can't burden anybody with this.
Yeah.
And I think, and this will hopefully resonate with other people going through this, is that if you're afraid that your person is going to just, I don't know, you fill in the blank, like whatever reaction or punishment they're going to, lob upon you. It's for me, and I think I'm finding for a lot of people that I hear the pain is less in the sin or the
Mhm.
choice of pornography. That the pain is in not trusting that she'd be there to help me. Right? The pain is in not bringing her into it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Yeah. The betrayal trauma isn't necessarily from the porn use. It's maybe from feeling lied to. Is that what you're saying? Is that what I'm
yeah,
hearing?
yeah, like feeling lied to, but also just feeling like undercut. Like I believed that she wouldn't have the capacity or the desire or the love to help me through the
Yeah.
challenge. You know what I mean? So like I robbed her of the opportunity to be that person, you
Yeah,
know?
and there's, like, so much love and compassion for both sides because as you hear your story, there's no part of me that is, like, blaming you. It's all just like, I understand. Like, of
Well,
course, like, with if
yeah,
that's the conditioning, there's just, like, so much compassion for both sides.
for sure. But not taking away all the hurt that this causes, and but there is a lot of confusion, out in mainstream about what this really means for people, or why they choose it, or whatever.
Really
I
unfair assumptions.
Yeah, I felt trapped. I felt scared. I felt helpless, and I just when you feel those, you numb out. You want to get away, and you just run. And one of the things that I'm trying to do now as I live authentically is get out in front of it, right? And bring something that Jessica said is like the people, how does she word it? I'm going to ruin it, Jessica. I'm sorry. It's like you can tell your story to the people who deserve to hear it, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
And yeah, like, so, I have a teenage son and I have a teenage daughter, and they have been integral in their own parts of this story in discussing this with them. And my my oldest son is not a touchy feely person. He hates getting a hug. Like, he just doesn't, and he always has since he was a baby. He
Yeah.
doesn't like physical touch. And when I had this conversation with him and just shared everything. Again, he's a teenager. I don't want him to go through some of the same thought processes that I did, and wanted to let him know like how much I, had struggled or whatever. And he immediately jumped up from the bed and just wrapped me in a hug. And
Oh,
I that's just gonna be filed away in my brain forever. And when I told my daughter, which was incredibly hard, later that day I was reading that book that I told you about. Like, is God disappointed in me? And I'm, down in the family room, and she comes down and she had her own book, and she came and snuggled up next to me, and she just said, "No." And I said, "What are you talking about?" Like, I didn't get what she was going with. And she said, "He's not disappointed in you because you're trying."
hmm.
And that was such a healing moment, but also just, yeah, just such a rewarding like piece of like, you can do this. Like, you can change your nature, you can be
Yeah.
open about it, and people will love you. And
So healing for you, and also, like, I'm getting chills thinking about your kids and, like, what a beautiful example and, like, lesson and, like, the vulnerability that you have, but then also I don't know, I just don't think it serves kids to always believe that their parents are perfect, but to see you, like, go through this and then love yourself through it and, like, find that worth and that worthiness in that, oh my gosh, what a blessing for them.
they are amazing, forgiving, wonderful kids. And my wife is incredible, even though that those experiences cause more pain, especially, to her, in them having to see that, like, we don't have it all figured out, but I can't be totally authentic with my life or with helping others through it if I don't, if I just don't be 100% open and say. And I find so much energy and joy and positivity in thinking about being able to just be open and positive, and just, I'm not hiding anything. I'm not living a double life. Like, there's so
Yeah.
much less stress and trauma that I'm causing myself or others in saying like, no, like, I have nothing to hide. You can ask me anything. And, and I couldn't do that at the beginning. I was so terrified to even start working with you and with Jess and whoever else. Like, I was like, like, I would never be able to sit and have this conversation
Yeah.
a year ago. Like, this, it's impossible. But now I can.
Yeah. Love that.
The other big thing that came from you and this curriculum is like the phrase thoughts are thoughts. Like, thoughts are thoughts, and they're just passing, and they don't give power over you unless you just grab it and give it place. Like, everybody has weird thoughts. It's okay.
Yeah.
And that was always a thing too. I'm like, oh man, your thoughts are going to condemn you. Well, your thoughts, that's not the point. Like, you could have a crazy weird thought, and it's just a thought. And Let it go.
You
Like
are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are
you,
not you.
you are not your thoughts. Like, it's just a thought. Like, don't give it place. Don't give it energy if you don't want to. Like, they're like,
Yeah.
that was weird.
Yes. Especially those of us who are a little more scrupulous than others.
For sure.
Me, yeah, it's like a common thing, especially with OCD or OCD tendencies, is these thoughts, but then like you're so concerned about them that you like hold on to them or you freak out about them or they happen more because you're scared of them.
Huh? Yeah. Yeah. So it's been so freeing to be like, that's a thought. I don't really care. Like,
Yeah.
and also this bad thing happened. Like, it's okay. Like, or even if it's a really bad thing, like, all right, I'm gonna sit with it. Where am I feeling it in my body? What do I need
Yeah.
to do to process through it? Like, what's it telling me? Right? Like,
Yeah.
all of these things have been so like they're so innate in human nature, but you don't think about it. But if you
Oh,
do give it place, you're like, okay, like it's not like it's overpowering me. Like I have to kind of put that into action. It's just, yeah, this realization, like you really do have a lot of control if you, but it takes like that externality, like almost looking at yourself as the subject. Like,
yes.
what am I
Yes.
feeling right now? That's weird. What is that telling me? I don't like that feeling. Like, what do I need to do right now to move into a different space? Like,
Yeah. You can't control your thoughts. I love this concept. You cannot control your thoughts. You can't, but you can control what happens after a thought. You
yeah,
can't control if you like maybe decided that you want to go into it a little bit more, but those first thoughts you can't control, and that's a lie. And that creates a lot of pain to believe that.
yeah, for sure. Well, because you do grow up with something like your thoughts will condemn you, or if you've thought about this, it's like committing adultery, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. And then in my
Yeah.
brain, be like, oh, well, adultery is next to murder, so therefore I'm a really terrible
Yeah.
person. So it's all of these things that have fed this worldview, like, or
Yeah.
this kind of this narrative, which isn't great. They're all factoids, but they don't tell the right story.
Yeah. And it's all like, it's so beautiful to come and do this healing work and to understand it for yourself so that we can start to change things going forward for our kids, for other people that we're in involvement with. Because especially, scrupulosity, it's not just like it's your fault or you were just born that way. There's some of that like personality, but there's also like conditioning that can bring it to a head.
Yeah,
And so understanding so we can carefully choose our words and think about things a little differently going forward for people is beautiful.
for sure. Yeah. So again, I'm just super grateful. I know I've taken up a ton of time at this point. So
It's great. So I have a few more questions
yeah.
that I'm happy to ask, but is there anything else that we missed that you wanted to share or do you feel good? This is
No,
amazing. All of it's been amazing.
yeah, I think this is pretty good.
Okay, amazing. So my last two questions. The first one, is there anything like what do you think is possible for you now going forward after doing all of this work? What do you see for yourself in the future?
Yeah.
Because we say this is about so much more than quitting porn, and you've done such a beautiful way of describing why that is. And I'm curious, like looking forward, what else is there for you? What do you see?
I used to think or believe that I suffered from imposter syndrome. And I think maybe to a small degree, I kind of do, just because whatever. But a lot of this, and I just say, like, in this amount of time that I've been working through this, one of the things that I was absolutely terrified of doing is in my industry, I get asked a lot to go to these conferences and sit on a panel and be an expert of yada, yada, yada. And I is super terrifying because I'm like, everybody in here knows way more than me, right? So I just couldn't get myself to do it. Since doing this work, not only have I done that multiple times and will continue, like I have more scheduled even just this month and next month, big national settings and things, I have the confidence to do that. Like where it's like, even though it has nothing to do with this spiritual, whatever side of me, but it's like, no, actually, I do have authority. I do have confidence in myself in because I know myself and I'm not hiding a piece of myself where maybe a big portion of my self confidence was locked away as well. So this being able to address all of these hard feelings of inadequacy and disappointment and failure and fraudulence, like I've unlocked the ability in my own professional and practical life to say, no, I'm me and I'm lovable and I'll love myself and I'm fallible and I'm okay with that.
I love it. I love that. That like gives me chills and makes me so excited because this is when it gets fun. It's like, okay, the porn stuff is hard, but now like this can be maybe a little fun and like I've unlocked these keys to feeling and to doing all of this. And this is where, it's just so much more about porn. Now we get to really live fully big if we want to, because we
Yeah,
know how to.
for sure. And, on top of that, a lot of this motivation for me is to connect with even just one
Yeah.
youth or who is feeling those same senses of being trapped or whatever as I did as youth, or an adult who's feeling trapped because of how they're serving, or in what capacity they're serving, or being afraid of disappointing their spouse or kids, or just that fear of that unknown. Like, just to tell them that there's so much more freedom with the pain. Like, it's the most painfully freeing thing that they could do if this is their issue. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. I love it. Thank you so much. And then my last question is, what would you say to someone who is where you were? Maybe they're considering joining or coming in and doing the work a little bit more in depth. Do you have any advice for them or thoughts for them?
Yeah, like, don't talk yourself out of it. Like, you're listening, or you've researched, or you've spent. I mean, I'm not the only one. There's so many that have done interviews like this where have said, "Oh, I consumed probably every episode of the podcast where I, had tried this app or I had done this thing." And I would say that you just don't wait. Like, and I'd also would say, because again, I'm like, a little bit miserly in a way, that,
Mhm.
if somebody's looking at the cost and going, I can't justify that, or I'm not gonna do that. I just look and go, and if it's something that has, like, if it was 30 years for me, 30 years of trying to figure myself out, and I totally can be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna explain away. Like, no way. Like, I'm not gonna do that. Like, I'm not gonna. I also had a lot of shame because I'm like, I'm not gonna take that family or that money from my family. Like, I'm not gonna. I could do so much more with that. I could take them on vacation, or I could whatever. And I can explain away a lot of things. But then I think to myself, the reality is they don't want another vacation. They want their dad, and they want their dad and their husband or whatever to be in a place where they're living authentically, that they are feeling love, that they are giving love, capable of doing that and showing up every day and being dependable, and just doing all the things to function as a amazing family member. Like, if this thing is keeping you from that, they don't need another trip. Like,
Yeah.
if that's what you're going to equate it to or whatever. Like, also that there's most likely so many people in your corner that, even if that's a struggle, they'll people want to help, right? Like, and if there's fear of coming out and talking to somebody, like, my probably best adult friend in the world, like, here lives a quarter mile from me and was my bishop for a time as an adult. And I was so fearful of losing a friendship because I didn't know how to talk to him about my experience as a bishop, and then knowing eventually he's going to take that hat off, and we still have our friendship. Like, how do I do that? And I got past that, but it took a long time. And it's something that you will find, that you'll just find your people. He is my family, right? He's my friend family, like, for life. Like, even though he's no longer, the bishop, but he was a period of time when I really needed him to help me process through a lot of this stuff. Like, we still go to lunch and we'll talk about these things. And I'm like, and he's really not even in that role anymore. He's just a friend. He's a friend who wants to help and understand more. And so there's people in your corner. There's people in your corner that you don't know are there. And if you don't rob them of the opportunity to not be there.
I love that. And it's like this, especially I feel like conditioning in men too. There's especially conditioning of like, it's scary to be vulnerable. It's scary to not just put on your stoic face and be, you know, untouchable. It can be scary, but like how beautiful it is when you are, and there are people in your corner, and we're in your corner too. So like we've got your back, and there's a whole community for you waiting here too on our end. And, we've got support groups every single week in the program too, to help you and support you, plus all the, other coaching calls and stuff. But I just want to let people know too, like, even if your mind's going, well, but everyone is going to reject me, it's probably not true. But if it is, you've got us. Always,
right.
no matter what.
And that's just it. I think you'll find your people. Like, and I'm still, there's a lot of people that I have not yet really opened up to about this, and I will. And I know that everybody has their ability to choose. They have their agency, and I'll find my people, that way. And some wherever part of the pendulum that they're in when it comes to understanding this, and it's just maybe another piece of information that that they're going to use to maybe launch their understanding of it. But those of us that are here and in the thick of it, and we see it from our way, we just have to recognize not everybody knows these things yet. So, but don't preclude them from the opportunity of learning it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ben. It's been a pleasure. It's been amazing. Appreciated this so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much for being here. We'll talk to you next week. And you want to say goodbye, Ben?
Oh, see everybody. And just thanks again for the opportunity. I wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you. All right, you guys. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
I want to invite you to come and listen to my free class, How to Overcome Pornography for Good Without Using Willpower. We talk about how to stop giving into urges without pure willpower or relying on phone filters so that you can actually stop wanting pornography. We talk about how to stop giving up after a few weeks or months. And spoiler alert, the answer isn't have more willpower. And then lastly, we talk about how to make a life without porn easily sustainable and permanent. If you're trying to quit porn, this class is a game changer. So you can go and sign up at sarahbrewer.com/masterclass, and it is totally free.